There are right now, as we speak, hundreds, nay thousands of people who cannot cross borders to see their families. These are the people who are physically getting their hands dirty, digging up the very things that are keeping state governments anywhere near profitable. These are the people who work as FIFO, fly-in, fly-out workers in the resources sector that creates billions of dollars for the state and federal economies. But particularly the hard border in Western Australia, where if you go home and see your kids, you have to take 2 weeks of unpaid leave to go into quarantine before going back to work, making money for the state and federal government in places where there is virtually no coronavirus at all. And unlike almost any other job, these people are tested every single day for whether they have coronavirus. So at the first possible sign of any of them having it, they'd be able to nip it in the bud there and then. There would be no chance of a second wave, another break, another spike in Western Australia. And this is the only television show that's talking about it. There's nothing on the 6 p.m. news in Perth. There's nothing in the local newspaper. There's nothing that's being said on the radio, and there's bugger all coming out of the union movement. So we asked you to get in touch with us if you are one of the people who is being directly screwed over by this, because people at home need to understand just how bad this situation is. And by golly, you have responded. Here's just a sample of some of the people who have decided to get in touch. First, Chris. Our son-in-law is a FIFO in Western Australia. My daughter has 2 children, and my wife and I have not seen him since the middle of March. 14 weeks. Our daughter was going to take the children and fly to Western Australia and isolate them for 14 days to see him, but the government decided it was not essential travel, so they would not approve it. An anonymous worker who's holding back his name so we don't put it here on the television. I've been a FIFO worker in Western Australia for 13 years, flying in from New South Wales. I had to fly back to work early from my break in March to get back to Western Australia before it closed its borders. My father died in May and I had to fly home to bury him. I returned to Western Australia on May 20, where again he had to isolate without pay for 2 weeks. During this time, his best mate was critically injured in a car accident, but because of these stupid rules, he couldn't go back and see him, so he had to stay without being able to help his mate who's in hospital. What about Bree? Her husband works in the Pilbara. We live with our 3 kids, which are 2, 5 and 9 in Brisbane. The husband was home for just 3 days before he got a call to go back to work. Basically, they had to make a decision about whether he stayed or potentially used up all of his leave, not having any income while sitting in these bloody hotel rooms because of the decision of the West Australian Premier. Well, guess what? They had no real choice. They have 3 children and a mortgage, so they haven't been able to see their dad in months. And Sally, she's a FIFO wife. 2 kids aged 8 and 6, one of which is on the autism spectrum. This is heartbreaking. We have had to work for many years, emotionally and financially, to get her feeling safe at school and participating in our community. If we were to move to Western Australia as the Premier requests, all of her support would vanish. It would take years to rebuild that trust, not to mention going on waiting lists for services through the NDIS. We would have 0 family support too. Please keep helping us be heard. We are the people and we are really hurting. This is true. There is no reason for this punishment. There is no reason to treat these people as economic prisoners. You are fine to take the taxes off their work for what they dig out of the mines, but you won't let them see their kids. We have to create a situation now where, first things first, anyone who has access to a microphone, a camera or a keyboard writes about this story. Where families have to make the obvious choice. They need to have food on the table rather than dad being able to cuddle their kids at the table. This is wrong. It is unnecessary, and we will do everything we can to talk about this week. In fact, we'll get Sally talking about her kid, one of whom is on that autism spectrum. We'll do that on the show in just a few minutes' time. You need to see a face to these stories. And Premier McGowan, you might be sitting high in the polls and think that you are a king for all time. The Labor Party might think that they can put flyers out saying that to bring down the borders somehow endangers the people of Western Australia. Well, your very own Chief Medical Officer said that if the borders came down, there would be a 10% chance of an increase in coronavirus cases. 10%. Yet these people suffer and suffer every day. There's only so long before these people start to have serious mental health issues, and it's going to be your fault. We'll do everything we can to save those families and reunite Australians. How would you feel if you knew that workers couldn't go home because of coronavirus, even though there's no coronavirus where they work, even though there's virtually no coronavirus in the entire state of which they work, even though there's no coronavirus in the place where they would fly home to? Well, that is exactly the situation that's playing out right now for hundreds, thousands of workers right now, good men and women who have, of course, made the choice to go and earn money for their family. And because of the border restrictions, particularly in Western Australia, they have to go with 2 weeks unpaid leave if they decided to go home to visit their families. Now, we've got a couple of calls from people and lots of emails from people who are willing to tell their story. And there are people, because, look, I don't know what the consequences are about talking on television here, but I appreciate the good people who are willing to do so, including Sally. And Sally is a mum of two, a wife for a long time, and a lady who's watching us right now, and she joins us now via Skype. Sally, thank you so much for joining us. Put simply, how long since your boy's been home?
Well, we were fortunate enough that he came home on Wednesday evening after 108 days.
Awesome. Awesome news.
So, yeah, a 2 week stop at home before we'll then have to take another 2 weeks into quarantine using up 4 weeks annual leave.
So, of course, the absurdity, right? There's nothing in Western Australia, there's nothing in South Australia, yet this whole 2 week dilemma. What's the toll been like on your family for those 110 days where the chats have been on FaceTime, and how have the kids reacted?
Oh, it's been tough. It's like physically exhausting when we were doing that period of home learning, but more so mentally draining, mentally exhausting. I have a child that's on the autism spectrum, so that sort of presents extra challenges along with anxiety that she suffers from, not quite understanding why daddy's not home like he normally would be. And when I don't really understand that myself and don't have a date to look forward to and get in that mindset, I don't possibly expect my children to understand either, being 8 and 6.
Now, it's very important for me to say to you, Sally, if the kids need a cuddle at any time in this conversation, don't shoo them away. Bring him in for the cuddle, okay? Don't worry. You're not going to be one of those people, you know, like the people on the BBC trying to get the kid away. Don't worry. You give him a cuddle, all right? We're a family-friendly show, and I'm glad that you're there. So, I mean,
thank you.
When you wrote, and you wrote specifically about your 6-year-old who's the one on the spectrum, is that the
8-year-old.
The 8-year-old, sorry.
Yeah.
So the 8-year-old on the spectrum, that essentially, if you picked up stumps and went from South Australia and went to WA, that the entire support network can't just be replaced. It's not something that you can up and go. What would happen if you went to WA, as the WA Premier is offering you 20 grand to move the whole family?
Yeah, look, it's taken years to build trust with the people that support her. So years to trust the school, trusting tutors, working with an OT, and those services you have to go on wait list for through the NDIS. It's not a matter of like we just fly over to WA, move into a house, and then all of a sudden we can resume therapy. There would be wait lists, and then there would be that time of building trust and the relationship, which just doesn't come overnight when you've got a kid who is quite anxious. It's not even an idea that we can entertain.
So for those that, for whatever reason, don't want to engage with this and they say, well, this is the life that you chose, what do you say to those people?
Yeah, that frustrates me no end. We, before we had children, we started off working in Queensland at an entry-level position to get into mining. We've moved to Newcastle. We've done the outback living in Roxby Downs, and that's when we had children. And, look, it's been thrown a few challenges there. So FIFO was the way for us to go, and it's frustrating that my husband has taken all those years to establish himself, worked hard to climb the ladder, and he deserves to be in the position that he's in. We didn't sign up for 108 days away from each other. We signed up for 2 weeks on, 1 week off. And while I understand sometimes overtime happens and that can change a little, we have no day to have a positive mindset. So it's not what we signed up for.
That's right. We still got you. We still got you, Sal. All good.
There we go. So, yeah, it's not what we signed up for.
So, okay, if you could speak directly to the Premier of Western Australia, what would you say about the situation that your family goes through the next time your bloke leaves?
It's trying hard not to think about it, because I can see it's going to break my children's hearts. that long goodbye. And because we don't know or have a date or an inclination when that border will open, I can't tell my children when it will be when they see Dad next. And I'd like to tell the Premier that why can't we have the border quarantine removed for those essential FIFO workers? In South Australia, we have no community transmission at the moment. And as a state, it's being handled really, really well. And it just doesn't make sense to me. And I don't know what to tell my kids. I'm trying not to think too far to that time when we say goodbye at the airport and just enjoy this time. But, inevitably, we just don't know when we're going to see him next after that.
Well, Sally, we love you. Good on you for being a trooper. I know what it was like to have two kids at home, let alone all of the different complications, and it was different. All the best to you. All the best to your husband. Thank you for talking to us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for your time. We really appreciate it too. Good.